Are you a dreamer? I know I am. A dreamer and a classically trained violinist, born and raised in former Soviet Union, who was supposed to have the most predictable career path until one day I woke up a refugee, having to flee my homeland forever due to severe ethnic persecution. And when in 1993, my mother and I were invited by the US government to come and reside in the United States of America, we landed in Oklahoma City with just my violin, my mother's famous pots and pans, and without a single dollar in our pockets. A few very eventful years later, I found myself divorced, a single mom of 3 adorable little kiddos, and having to break into what could be the most competitive and conservative career fields in this country, classical music performance. And looking back at those days filled with doubt and disappointment, I remember so many moments when it would have been just too easy for me to give in to my doubts and let go of my dreams. And yet today, I am living those dreams. I am a violin professor at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. I have a beautiful and loving family and getting ready for a performance of a lifetime, my Carnegie Hall debut. And if you were to ask me right now, what was it that kept me going? I would have to tell you that it was my mom, because it was all her fault. Because she was the one who insisted that at the ripe old age of 7, I'd be enrolled in our local music school to start my training as a classical violinist. And it was since that age that I knew the true meaning of the words, "The show must go on." And ever since then, every time I perform, I remember my teacher's words that no matter what you think or how you feel, but you never, ever, ever walk off stage until the fat lady sings. And when it comes to pursuing my dreams, well, I've gotten pretty good at this. Because you see, being a musician is like being a full-time dream chaser. Because every time I decide to learn a new piece of music, it becomes my dream. And I'm completely obsessed with it. I practice it. I think of it day and night. And then, when the time is right, I finally get to live out that dream and perform that beautiful music for my audiences in the concert. And once the concert is over, time to get me a new dream. And if there's anything that I've learned from making that dream-chasing journey over and over again, it is that doubt is #1 killer of any dream. And if you let doubt dwell long enough in your mind and in your soul, it will cover the way to your dreams with thickest and most depressing darkness. But thankfully, there is an antidote to that darkness of doubt. It's called clarity. And clarity will get your path lit. So don't let go of your dreams. Ditch the doubts instead. And let me show you where to find that light switch of clarity when you need it most. Well, technically, finding clarity is not so much about when or where, and it's more about the what. Did you know that the fastest way to clarify any situation is by asking a what question? And a series of what questions can turn the long and winding road to your dreams into clear step-by-step directions to your goals. And I was only 14 years old when I've discovered the illuminating power of a what question. You see, I got my hands on that very difficult piece of music. And my teacher told me that if I could play that piece, I could play just about anything, because that piece is considered by violinists probably the most hard thing ever written for violin solo. And so one day, during my practice at home, I decided to kind of feel my way and play through that piece. And after about 3.5 hours, I found myself at the end of the first line of introduction. And by then, I was sure, and I had no doubt in my mind, that I don't ever want to see that piece of music again. But then, accidentally, I turned the page and I saw what was the heart of this piece. You see, this piece is based on an old Irish tune called The Last Rose of Summer. And even though I've never heard it before, but when I looked at the music, I could tell that it was very, very beautiful. And I just absolutely had to play it. So I thought, well, let me see, what is the first note? What is the next note? And what would be the next fingering there? And what would be the bowing here? And what is it that I'm plucking over there? And before I knew it, I could actually play through it. And it went something like this. And I was hooked. And this beautiful piece now became my new musical dream. Because you see, first of all, the melody was so beautiful, I absolutely had to learn it so I could share this beauty with my audiences. And the second thing that I suddenly learned, that I could solve any challenge, no matter how hard it is, as long as I do it one what at a time. And so about a couple of billions of what questions later, and many, many years down the road, I was finally ready. And I scheduled a performance of that piece. And at first, I was so incredibly happy. And then I started waking up at night with cold sweats because of two dirty little words. What if? What if I completely mess up and it will be a complete disaster? What if I shake so violently on stage that I drop my bow to the floor? That actually happened to me once. You see, if doubt were a country, then what if would have been its native tongue. And we musicians know that language all too well and all the fears that come with it. And we call it performance anxiety. And if you dwell too long on the negative what-ifs, it's like getting yourself a one-way train ticket to Doubtland. But there's such an easy way to turn that train around. All you have to do is take those negative what-ifs and turn them 180 degrees around. And before you know it, you'll be doubting your doubts instead of your beliefs. And that's what I did. And so instead of thinking, what if this is going to be a disaster, I started thinking, what if this is going to be the best performance of my life? And let me tell you, once I learned that simple little trick, it completely changed my performance experiences. And I could tell you so many inspiring stories about the power of the positive what-ifs, but I only have time for one. And that story is about a very rare, old, and very beautiful and valuable violin that was made in Italy in 1759 by an Italian violin maker, Paolo Testori. Somehow that violin made its way to Chicago and then to Oklahoma, where it sat in the attic for 60 years without ever being played. And then one day my mom decided she would pray that I would have an old Italian instrument. To which I said, no way I'm going to pray for this. I'm very happy with the violin I have right now. And if I start praying, what if the answer is no? I will be so disappointed. And my mom replied, but what if the answer is yes? And she kept praying. A couple of weeks later, I get a call from a violin maker, a friend of mine in Oklahoma, and he told me, you know what, I just purchased a real Paolo Testori violin. In fact, I know for 100% it's a real Paolo Testori. And I want you to come and play it. And if you like it, it's yours. So I went to his shop, and I played that Paolo Testori, but I didn't like it. I absolutely loved it, and it was mine right then and there. And when I brought it home to show it to my family, I realized that it was exactly a month since the day my mom told me, but what if the answer is yes? And so the next time those negative what ifs start yapping in your head, turn them 180 degrees around so you can experience the power of positive what ifs. And let me tell you, once you experience that power, there will be no stopping you. But every journey has to come to an end. And at the end of every journey to a dream is a moment when you have to present that dream to the world, because that's the only way that dream will become a reality. And at that moment, you will probably encounter some type of audience. For me, that audience is usually in the pews at my concerts. For someone else, it could be that person who will interview them for their dream job, or maybe it's that house, that buyer that will buy the house that will finally make you a dream commission. But whatever type of audience you're facing, it's quite possible that you will experience that peculiar type of anxiety we call stage fright. It comes in all kinds of shapes and sizes, but I remember one particular case of stage fright that was so bad that I was shaking in my boots several days before the performance. By then, I already knew it was just the doubt that trying to get me to let go of my dreams. So I started asking the what questions, and the first answer was, well, I'm just afraid of being judged by my audience. And if I could speak to that audience at that moment, I would say something like this: hello, my name is Seitz, and I'm supposed to perform for you, but I'm not going to because I think you're a bunch of most critical, negative, and vicious individuals ever assembled under one roof. Now, who is being judgmental here? And I thought, oh boy, I think I've had enough. I'm going to go to sleep. So I had a dream. And in that dream, I was actually facing that audience in a concert. And it was really weird because I was looking at the completely filled hall. And I realized I knew every person in that audience. And then I understood something so shocking that I woke up. And that shocking thing that I understood in my dream was that the reason I knew every person in that audience because they all had the same face. And that face was mine. I was my own worst critic. I was that judge that was so afraid of, and ironically, I'm always at my concerts. So I finally knew I got to the bottom of my what questions. They were all answered. Now was time for step number 2, turning those negative thoughts around. And you know what I did? I thought, well, if I had a stick that had judgment on one end, what would be on the other end of that stick? And I realized it was grace. And so for those 2 days before the concert, every time I was tempted to have a judgmental thought about myself, and there were so many, I never even counted that, I never realized that was happening. I replaced it with something that gave grace to myself, and it was so much fun. It felt so good, you should try it. And then before I knew it, something amazing happened, because that grace filled me with so much joy and happiness, it started spilling around me. And before I knew, my mind was completely clear, and I realized, wait a minute, those people that are coming to my concert, they spent their hard-earned dollars. They're going to spend several hours of their lives with me instead of playing on their phones. Obviously, that is probably, could it just be that it's because they find some value in what I do? That was amazing. That realization made me look forward to that concert. And I enjoyed that so much. But then after the performance, when the audience started pouring backstage as usually and giving me hugs and telling me what a blessing my music was to them, I understood that was that grace coming back to me 100-fold. Because you see, that's what grace does. You only need to give a little bit of it to get so much of it in return. And that's why we call it amazing grace. And so all of you out there, beautiful dreamers, as you continue chasing your dreams, I can promise you that two things will happen. First, the doubt will always be there, crouching at your door, trying to manipulate you into letting go of your dreams. Second, you don't have to take it anymore, because now you know how to ditch those doubts by asking what questions and mapping out clear directions to your goals. By turning your negative what-ifs around and filling up your spiritual tanks with energy you need to make that journey. And finally, last but not least, remembering about giving and receiving that amazing grace. And that grace will light up your journey all the way to that moment when you realize you're actually living your dreams. And if you ask me how I know this, well, that's because this is how this refugee came all the way from Carnage to Carnegie Hall. See you all at Carnegie Hall.